Hey, Purple Flowers. This is just real quick. It's just a test. I'm testing a different device. I will be going live here shortly, maybe next hour or so. Let me say something.
Strategies that he uses again and again and again. He's got very aggressive goals. Sometimes his credibility has been, well, oftentimes his credibility has been very problematic. And you saw that in the trade negotiations on Liberation Day, April 2nd. He said, we're never going to change, we're never going to change, we're never going to negotiate. And 2 days later, we've got a 90-day pause. So that can obviously be very problematic. That's a predictable certainty when it comes to President Trump and his negotiations. The other thing is he tends to have a relatively short-term focus on these negotiations. And when I was talking about short-term goal with regard to Iran, we may very well have initially degraded it, but now that they don't have a lot to lose, it becomes more problematic. Also, long-term, I think he had a great opportunity prior to this military action to actually try to get a broader Middle East peace agreement on the table. We had strong leverage with Israel. We had strong leverage with Iran. You had strong leverage with the Arab states and obviously also with the Palestinians. Now our leverage is weaker with the Israelis because, and I don't know this for a fact because I wasn't in the room, but it seems likely that he didn't extract some significant concession from the Israelis prior to this strike. I mean, he could have put a lot more on the table in that regard, and that could very well have pushed a broader Middle East peace negotiation process forward. But as far as we've heard so far, that has not been on the table.
Martin Latz, author of The Real Trump Deal, an eye-opening look at how he really negotiates. We always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox, just to try to get a little glimpse as to maybe what we can see happening in the future regarding President Trump. And what I gather is that we really don't know at all.
He don't know.
It's always tough to predict the future.
Of course. Marty, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
He don't know. He don't know what he doing. Well, hopefully the smart people on his cabinet knows, because we know he don't. Y'all, this is just a test. I'm for the country. Yeah, I am too. But I'm for proper intelligence. I don't want a war just because there's, you know, people. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay. A lot of times we suffer consequences physically with our family, and financially with cost of products to maintain and live. Trade. We just had $10, $11 eggs. They just went down. Milk, everything. Cost of groceries. That type of stuff he don't have to worry about. That's all I'm saying. Oh, Lord. I thought I paused. Hold on.
It's tough to predict the future.
Of course. Marty, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Hey, Brian. I'm testing. I'll be back. I was just testing how I was going to do something. And
emergency.
Hey, Max. Thank you. This was just a test. Oh my God. Now,
and
hold
you're now
on.
watching an ABC News special report right now. This is a live picture from the Pentagon. As we noted,
I won't be on here
Secretary
long because
Pete
this was
Hegseth,
just a
Pete
test,
Hegseth
y'all.
And Joint Chiefs Chairman Kane are supposed to come and address the public in just a moment here. I can't tell from how far away this is. I believe that's them coming to the podiums right now. Let's go ahead and listen to this press conference from the Pentagon.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran...
How can he say for over 10 years and he hasn't been in office for 10 years?
Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back.
It was not our fight.
When this president speaks,
and you right,
the
Brian.
world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up.
He just made a statement about this has been his something for over 10 years. It has not been 10 years. Y'all making a
the
anyway.
operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers,
Hi,
who
Gene.
flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed
I hope
flawlessly.
my country doesn't
And I want to
follow
give
the
recognition
state.
to our allies in Israel.
I hope my country, what's your country, don't follow the states. What do you mean?
Positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved.
No, was this drunk president? Oh my. No. Was this drunk president or sober?
It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOMP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear.
You just
We will
started
act
war.
swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of a plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles
That's
against
supposed to
key
go through
surface
Congress, right?
infrastructure targets at Esfahan.
Right. It's supposed to go
As
through
the
Congress.
Operation
So
Midnight
it was a
Hammer strike
power move for
package
him.
entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the fourth
He
and
don't
fifth
follow
generation
orders.
aircraft
He
pushed
don't
out
follow
in
procedures.
front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the President clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The President authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the President decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
This Pentagon press conference was not yesterday. Paper route, Hank.
Leadership, he was
Stop
fully
lying.
committed to the peace process.
They just said Sunday morning.
Negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops.
Stop by Sherwin-Williams and get 30% off select paints and stains, including super paint, woodscapes, and
taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General,
And once again, you're watching an ABC News special report. This is a press briefing from the Pentagon happening right now. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chairman, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, talking to reporters right now about this historic and extraordinary strike on Iran. The U.S. carrying out military strikes on 3 separate nuclear facilities. Defense Secretary Hegseth saying it was an incredible, overwhelming success. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated, and praising President Trump for what he called a plan that was bold and brilliant. He also there at the end, you heard some questions from reporters, the Defense Secretary saying the mission was not about regime change, but overall throughout this press conference talking about these extraordinary details. This was the
Trump
largest
don't
use
follow
of
nothing
B-2
that
bombers
Obama put in
American
place.
history.
So that
It
don't
was
even make
also
sense.
The first use of those massive
He
ordnance
dismissed
penetrators,
anything.
so what they
He
call
went
MOBs.
totally
These are those
opposite of
bunker
anything that
busting bombs
Obama
that only
put
the
in
United
place.
States
So
has.
Barton
The only
Bella,
armed,
that's
military
false
in the
as
whole
well.
world that has these types of bombs that can penetrate deep into these nuclear facilities. More than 125 aircraft participated in this mission. Let's go ahead and bring in our ABC News contributor, former Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, who has also been a Defense and State Department official. And Colonel Ganyard, one thing that we heard over and over in this press conference, it was a decoy, deception effort, and the element of surprise.
Deception is correct.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this last night where everybody was caught off guard. So the operational security here was actually quite extraordinary. So we were seeing reports on Friday that there was a wave of B-2s that was coming across the Pacific. So all eyes were looking at what might be happening. Are those B-2s going to Guam? Meanwhile, the 7 B-2s that were used in this strike took off and headed east and came across the Atlantic through the Mediterranean. And so everybody's looking over here. They snuck in and nobody knew, so good OPSEC on the Pentagon side. I think the other thing that strikes me here, Whit, is the number of aircraft involved. 125, as you said. So this was not just a few B-2s flying over a target and some Tomahawks. There were likely F-22s, F-35s, F-15s that were out in front escorting the B-2s over the target area. There were preemptive drops of ordnance on surface-to-air missile sites. They were shooting missiles that actually home in on
Right,
missile
Jesse,
sites. So
JJ, we signed
quite
nothing.
A huge, extensive
This was a
practice,
power move.
project, and so really quite remarkable.
Steve Ganyard, stand by for a moment. We just want to go back to the Pentagon. This press briefing is still underway, and they're answering some questions from reporters. Let's listen in, and then we'll chat on the backside.
They can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years,
He
frankly,
did not go through the
Iran
proper
cannot have a
protocol.
nuclear weapon. And
He's not
ultimately decided
exempt.
This is the moment, given their stonewall.
That is not his
when
job.
Direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening.
There are processes in place, process and procedures. He did not follow them.
What security procedures are being taken
So this is his
to
war.
protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Commander-in-Chief still has to go through a protocol. He is not exempt.
Protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will
He
say
is a
we're
bully.
being,
Absolutely,
proactive
Alana.
and not reactive,
If Commander-in-Chief
and being very
still has a
thoughtful about it. We'll
hierarchy,
do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
it's called Congress.
I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean
This
it
is his
limits our
war.
ability to respond.
This is
We
why
will
he
respond if
acted a
necessary. The
fool
most powerful military in the world is postured and
at
prepared to
the
defend our
Capitol
people.
when he
But what the
didn't get
president gave us, as I
reelected.
said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was
Thank you,
overwhelming.
Jeff.
That's what the
He was
Iranian
wrong.
regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately
He gonna get us
demonstrated
all
that
killed.
Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes. Hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question
He
for,
still did not,
Secretary
Dickie, he didn't go through the
Chairman.
proper procedures,
Strike,
even to do a veto. He, whatever y'all come up with, he did, there's procedures in place for it.
Is there any direct?
I don't know what that means, pressure.
Well, I would say.
What is nukes? I don't know what that means. No, he did not. They have said that, Barton. Let me get your ass up out of here. Because they've already said he did not. And you keep insisting on repeating the same shit over. He did not.
Launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel.
So sit in the corner.
And there certainly have been conversations.
For about 30 minutes. And if you come back again with that foolishness, I'm going to get you up out of here.
And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this,
I agree, Tony Garcia. God bless America. We're going to need him. I mean, we need him every day, but Lord, please.
Work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky.
Thank you.
Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies?
Yeah, we get excited about this type of stuff, but we don't think about the consequences
speak to specific assets
in our everyday living over here in our country.
Any further assets from other theaters to aid and force protection?
Do your research or hit my Cash App, Louise. I'm not telling you nothing. Do your own research.
And
don't question me
and in working
for
in
free.
Collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President.
Y'all hit the like button.
Future things, but the American people should
know that we
carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered.
In other words, Louis, I'm going to remove you. Bye. I said I'm not going back and forth with you.
Precisely.
And you're not going to get your point across freely over here. Put it on a super chat or a super sticker. Like I said.
Yes.
The president may not want.
You're not special. You're not entitled.
The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited.
So he bypassed Congress.
In that sense, has a choice.
He bypassed Congress.
To them, this is nuclear sites. This is nuclear capabilities. This is the line that the president.
He bypassed Congress.
In the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public.
Here you go, just the glance. Could you hear that?
Are you prepared for?
Could you hear that? Just a glance. Yeah, let me silence him for you again. You done lost your mind.
Ultimately,
don't tell me what to do over here.
Assets and people in those
now, if you make another smart comment, just a glance, I'm gonna talk on my live. If you don't like it,
Thanks for the
leave.
question on sort of the global picture, and as you know, that's one
What
of our
Ozzy
jobs
say?
is to look globally at the entire range of challenges.
Yeah,
We are
understand. My
always
regular
carefully
tea
considering
sippers put
our
your
force
name in the
posture
comment. I'm getting your
around
ass
the
up out of
world,
here.
and then offering options to the secretary and to the president. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the
So
world.
watch what you say, Ozzy. If he puts your name in my comment section again, you out of here for good.
Thank you. What communications are being
If
sent
you
to the
notice,
Iranians right now?
he
and
did
is
it in
there
the middle
any
of the night.
possibility of diplomacy
Absolutely.
now or in the coming days?
I can only
He's
confirm
sneaky.
that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict, we acknowledge that, but the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace, but I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian
Always overstep
is a threat.
His position.
And was willing to take.
That's why he's a convicted
this
felon.
Precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, he always overstep his position.
My name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining
the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
this mission was not and has not been about regime
Okay,
change.
but you're not the president, John.
Authorized a precision operation.
Are you able to vote?
To neutralize the threats
No,
to our
but he is.
posed by the Iranian.
You know, are you able to get a job and live any and everywhere? No, because you're a convicted felon. But okay. So he's entitled, and you're a convicted felon, and you're not. Why has he not lifted that for convicted felons? Because he don't care nothing about you. How about that, John Sykes?
No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president
Yeah, how about that?
on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process. Wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that...
And once again, you're watching an ABC News special report. This is a press briefing from the Pentagon happening right now. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, talking to reporters right now about this historic and extraordinary strike on Iran. The U.S. carrying out military strikes on 3 separate nuclear facilities. Defense Secretary Hegseth saying it was an incredible, overwhelming success. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated, and praising President Trump for what he called a plan that was bold
By Gordon, let me
brilliant.
see.
He also there at the end, you heard some questions from reporters, the Defense Secretary saying the mission was not about regime change, but
By Gordon.
throughout this press conference talking about these extraordinary details. This was the largest use of B-2 bombers in American history. It was also the first use of those massive ordnance penetrators, or what they call MOPs. These are those bunker-busting bombs that only the United States has. The only armed military in the whole world that has these types of bombs that can penetrate deep into these nuclear facilities. More than 125 aircraft participated in this mission. Let's go ahead and bring in our ABC News contributor, former Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, who has also been a Defense and State Department official. And Colonel Ganyard, one thing that we heard over and over in this press conference, it was a
Hi
decoy,
to everyone who's speaking.
Deception effort and the element of surprise.
Yeah, Whit, and I think we talked about this last night, where everybody was caught off guard. So the operational security here was actually quite extraordinary. So we were seeing reports on Friday that there was a wave of B-2s that was coming across the Pacific. So all eyes were looking
John,
at
you're a
what
lie.
might be happening. Are
Stop
those
lying.
B-2s going to Guam? Meanwhile,
I can't stand a
the
liar.
7,
Just lie
B-2s
because.
that were used in this strike took off and headed
You have
east
a
and came
you
across
have
the
an
Atlantic
office
through the
a job in the
Mediterranean.
White House too, don't
Everybody's
you,
looking over
John?
here. They
So make
snuck in
believe
and nobody
ass.
knew, so good OPSEC on the Pentagon side. I think the other thing that strikes me here, Whit, is
Oh, my
the
God.
number of aircraft involved. 125, as you said. So this was not just a few B-2s flying over a target and some Tomahawks. There were likely F-22s, F-35s, F-15s that were out in front escorting the B-2s over the target area. There were preemptive drops of ordnance on surface-to-air missile sites. They were shooting missiles that actually home in on missile sites. So this was quite a huge, extensive practice project, and so really quite remarkable.
Steve Ganyard, stand by for a moment. We just want to go back to the Pentagon. This press briefing is still underway, and they're answering some questions from reporters. Let's listen in, and then we'll chat on the
Say that they
backside.
can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when
Bye,
direct
Ricardo.
military action had
You
to
don't
be
tell
taken
me what to do on my platform.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Now I'm gonna put your ass in the corner. You think about it for 30 minutes and you come back the right way. I'm going to talk. If you don't like it, leave. Okay?
U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere.
Okay?
And Secretary Hegseth,
Think about it, Ricardo Corn.
War on terrorism veteran.
You done lost your mind.
Who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction. Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing in defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
Yeah, I had to take a call.
Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final
Because y'all
blow
haven't
to
hit the
Iran's
like
nuclear
button.
program
Y'all want the
And none
volume?
could.
Hit the like button.
until President Trump. The Operation President Trump plan.
There you go. Please hit the like
And
button.
you're now watching an ABC News special report right now. This is a live picture from the Pentagon. As we noted, both Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman Kane are supposed to come and address the public in just a moment.
I got
here.
it,
can't tell
Shane,
from
can
how
you
far
hear
away
now?
This is, I believe that's them coming to the podiums right now. Let's
Can
go
y'all
ahead and
hear
listen
now?
to this press conference from the Pentagon.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The Operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy, across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, not of these nuclear sites in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOMP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of a plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Isfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the president and the secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the president, the secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process. Wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that...
And once again, you're watching an ABC News special report. This is a press briefing from the Pentagon happening right now. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, talking to reporters right now about this historic and extraordinary strike on Iran. The U.S. carrying out military strikes on 3 separate nuclear facilities. Defense Secretary Hegseth saying it was an incredible, overwhelming success. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated, and praising President Trump for what he called a plan that was bold and brilliant. He also there at the end, you heard some questions from reporters, the Defense Secretary saying the mission was not about regime change, but overall throughout this press conference talking about these extraordinary details. This was the largest use of B-2 bombers in American history. It was also the first use of those massive ordnance penetrators, or what they call MOPs. These are those bunker-busting bombs that only the United States has. The only armed military in the whole world that has these types of bombs that can penetrate deep into these nuclear facilities. More than 125 aircraft participated in this mission. Let's go ahead and bring in our ABC News contributor, former Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, who has also been a Defense and State Department official. And Colonel Ganyard, one thing that we heard over and over in this press conference, it was a decoy, deception effort, and the element of surprise.
Yeah, Whit, and I think we talked about this last night, where everybody was caught off guard. So the operational security here was actually quite extraordinary. So we were seeing reports on Friday that there was a wave of B-2s that was coming across the Pacific. So all eyes were looking at what might be happening. Are those B-2s going to Guam? Meanwhile, the 7 B-2s that were used in this strike took off and headed east and came across the Atlantic through the Mediterranean. And so everybody's looking over here. They snuck in and nobody knew, so good OPSEC on the Pentagon side. I think the other thing that strikes me here, Whit, is the number of aircraft involved. 125, as you said. So this was not just a few B-2s flying over a target and some Tomahawks. There were likely F-22s, F-35s, F-15s that were out in front escorting the B-2s over the target area. There were preemptive drops of ordnance on surface-to-air missile sites. They were shooting missiles that actually home in on missile sites. So this was quite a huge, extensive practice project, and so really quite remarkable.
Steve Ganyard, stand by for a moment. We just want to go back to the Pentagon. This press briefing is still underway, and they're answering some questions from reporters. Let's listen in, and then we'll chat on the backside.
They can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes.
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction? Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets, force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region. And we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests and reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Once again, you're watching this press conference happening at the Pentagon right now, getting extraordinary details from the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, talking about these planes, these American B-2 stealth bombers flying from the middle of America in Missouri, undetected in the darkness of night, and carrying out this strike against Iran. Let's go ahead and bring in Colonel Steve Ganyard, who is our, forgive me, we're going to speak with Colonel Steve Ganyard right now. And Colonel, I just wanted to bring you back into this because we were getting more of these details from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs there, talking about this 18-hour flight, multiple refuelings. And he said, remarkably, though, as they arrived, that they're currently unaware of any shots fired at U.S. forces going in, and then said Iran's fighters did not fly.
Yeah, most of the Iranian Air Force has been destroyed. So we've seen pictures of ancient F-14s, ancient F-5s being destroyed. Most of the airfields within Iran have been cratered by Israel. And so we also know that back during October of last year that the strikes that the Israelis made on Iran took out most of the air defenses. So the air defenses within Iran have been beaten down not only in the past 10 days, but months ago. And so this made it, I won't say simple, but it made the planning effort that the U.S. undertook a bit more straightforward. So very little air defense, nobody shot. They had the element of surprise. They faked out the whole world where these B-2s were coming from and when they were coming.
And Steve, I also wanted to ask you, this is a question that I know many Americans have, and we heard it in the press conference there. You know, what about a prolonged conflict with Iran? And is President Trump prepared for that? And Secretary Hegseth says the mission has not been about regime change. And he said this is most certainly not open-ended. So then how does the Pentagon prepare for the days to come and potential retaliation from Iran?
With the Iranians have a decision to make here, and that is, do they come back after the U.S. and risk the whole might of the U.S. military joining the fight with Israel? If they go after U.S. troops in countries in the Persian Gulf, say Saudi Arabia or Qatar, they risk pulling those countries and eventually the UN into a broader conflict. So the U.S.
Back to the Pentagon. This press briefing is still underway, and they're answering some questions from reporters. Let's listen in, and then we'll chat on the backside.
They can't have. We will take a few questions, Phil.
Yeah. So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process. Wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment. There was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that...
And once again, you're watching an ABC News special report. This is a press briefing from the Pentagon happening right now. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, talking to reporters right now about this historic and extraordinary
Joe B, it's finna go back
strike
up.
on Iran. The U.S. carrying out military strikes on 3 separate nuclear facilities. Defense Secretary Hegseth saying it was an incredible, overwhelming success. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated, and praising President Trump for what he called a plan that was bold and brilliant. He also there at the end, you heard some questions from reporters, the Defense Secretary saying the mission was not about regime change, but overall throughout this press conference talking about these extraordinary details. This was the largest use of B-2 bombers in American history. It was also the first use of those massive ordnance penetrators, or what they call MOPs. These are those bunker-busting bombs that only the United States has. The only armed military in the whole world that has these types of bombs that can penetrate deep into these nuclear facilities. More than 125 aircraft participated in this mission. Let's go ahead and bring in our ABC News contributor, former Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, who has also been a Defense and State Department official. And Colonel Ganyard, one thing that we heard over and over in this press conference, it was a decoy, deception effort, and the element of surprise.
Yeah, Whit, and I think we talked about this last night, where everybody was caught off guard. So the operational security here was actually quite extraordinary. So we were seeing reports on Friday that there was a wave of B-2s that was coming across the Pacific. So all eyes were looking at what might be happening. Are those B-2s going to Guam? Meanwhile, the 7 B-2s that were used in this strike took off and headed east and came across the Atlantic through the Mediterranean. And so everybody's looking over here. They snuck in and nobody knew. So good OPSEC on the Pentagon side. I think the other thing that strikes me here, Whit, is the number of aircraft involved. 125, as you said. So this was not just a few B-2s flying over a target and some Tomahawks. There were likely F-22s, F-35s, F-15s that were out in front escorting
stop
the
playing.
B-2s over the target area. There were preemptive drops of ordnance on surface-to-air missile sites. They were shooting missiles that actually home in on missile sites. So this was quite a huge, extensive practice project, and so really quite remarkable.
Steve Gaynor, stand by for a moment. We just want to go back to the Pentagon. This press briefing is still underway, and they're answering some questions from reporters. Let's listen in, and then we'll chat on the backside.
Say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their
over
stonewalling,
20 years,
when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes.
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Weapons of mass
Thanks, sir, for the
destruction
question.
again.
I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region. And we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that, but president set.
I need for y'all to hit the like button.
Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM.
Yeah, I'm pausing until we get the likes up. Double tap your screen. Hit the like button. Are y'all able to hear me?
Good morning from Washington. Stunning developments last night as American warplanes attack Iran's nuclear program. A special edition of This Week starts right now.
Okay, I'm gonna shut it down.
Carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime.
President Trump brings America directly into Israel's conflict with Iran.
Israel's conflict. Y'all hear that? That's their conflict, not ours. He just said it. It's Israel's conflict, not ours. This is not our fight. And he do have to have permission if there was not a threat on the U.S. So all of y'all saying he didn't have to get permission is not correct from Congress, because there was no imminent threat to the U.S.
All the fallout as the United States.
So he done made a deal,
conflict in the Middle East.
A behind-the-scenes deal.
This is a special edition.
Yeah, that's all it is.
The U.S. strikes Iran.
It was not a threat to the U.S.
Good morning. Welcome to This Week. It's the most consequential and high-risk decision Donald Trump has ever made. The man who told the world in his inaugural address that he would measure success by the wars he ended, and more importantly, by the wars he never got into, has launched a major military strike on Iran. The big question this morning: did the president's actions effectively end a long simmering conflict with Iran?
Stop whining.
It's been going on since 1979, or did he just get America into a major new war in the Middle East? The president met with his national security team in the Situation Room last night as the attacks were underway. Massive attacks featuring more than 125 U.S. aircraft, including B-2 bombers that dropped a number of massive ordnance penetrator bombs during their mission over Iran, directly targeting 3 of Iran's key nuclear sites. And a number of Tomahawk cruise missiles were also fired at targets inside Iran from a U.S. Navy submarine. Not long after the bombs fell, I called President Trump's cell phone. He answered, telling me the mission was,
I'm
quote,
being
a tremendous
censored.
success. Not long after that, he gave his address to the
Oh my
nation,
God.
claiming mission accomplished.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a
Thank you. Stop
spectacular
playing.
military
Oh Lord,
success.
now I can go in there and get
Iran's
something to
key
eat.
nuclear
Thank you.
enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
My guest this morning, Vice President J.D. Vance, will also talk to the Republican chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who applauded the president's decision, and the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, who has grave concerns about what just happened and what is to come. But first, we have team coverage from our reporters around the world. We begin with White House correspondent Mary Bruce. So, Mary, the president clearly took a big gamble last night, betting that the United States could destroy Iran's nuclear program without getting withdrawn into a long, drawn-out conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah, John, look, there is no question this morning that this is absolutely the largest and potentially most dangerous risk and gamble of Trump's presidency. He is betting that the U.S. can destroy Iran's nuclear program and capabilities without dragging America into yet another long, drawn-out conflict in the Middle East, something he has promised Americans he would avoid. Trump has long vowed to end wars, not start them, but he has also long promised that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Now, last night, the president came out here at the White House and declared that this mission was a success. He said that Iran, quote, must now make peace, believing this will somehow push Tehran to finally make a deal and negotiate. But if they don't agree to peace on Trump's terms, he warned that future attacks will be, quote, far greater and a lot easier, saying there are many targets left and promising to go after them with precision, speed, and skill. Now, what comes next is unknown. Should Iran strike back, this could escalate very quickly, and it remains to be seen ultimately what impact this will have on Iran's nuclear program, whether these strikes have destroyed their chances to rebuild, John.
And really, just quickly, what do we know about the president's decision-making here? He had set a 2-week deadline. He had said he wanted diplomacy. What caused this to happen so quickly?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The president for weeks was pushing for a diplomatic solution. He had given himself 2 weeks to make this decision, trying to give diplomacy one last chance. Instead, he took just 2 days to make this decision. It was just on Thursday that the president said that there was a substantial chance for negotiations. At the time, I pressed the White House on why he believed that, what progress was he seeing, and they wouldn't say. So it's still not clear what exactly changed, what led the president to decide that diplomacy was dead and that he had to strike, or, John, was this all just a head fake to give the U.S. cover to go ahead and bomb Iran?
All right, Mary, thank you. Let's get to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, in Tel Aviv. Ian, we saw the first Iranian response was a barrage of missiles targeting Israel, but Iranian officials have declared that America's actions will have everlasting consequences, the implication towards America.
Yeah, that's right. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps saying that there will be a huge response. Also adding that the situation for American military bases there, the vulnerability has just doubled. Now, we heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff earlier saying that force protection measures had been put into place proactively. But the role model, if you like, that we have was the assassination by Donald Trump during his first presidency against General Soleimani, who was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was taken out, and Iran did respond. It attacked U.S. bases in the region. However, we've heard again explicitly warnings from Defense Secretary Hegseth, from President Trump and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that any action by Iran will be met by a much stronger reaction from the United States. But of course, this need not necessarily be conventional from Iran. It has proxies in the region, albeit weakened through Israeli action over the last 20 months or so. You have Hezbollah in Lebanon. You have the Houthi rebels who are potentially capable of targeting U.S. assets going through the Persian Gulf. And you also have the Popular Mobilization Units. These are the pro-Iranian militias who are very active, very powerful inside Iran. Iraq. I think it's unlikely that there won't be a response, but is it enough to then trigger a further reaction from the U.S.? One other thing I think is worth bearing in mind, the President and the Defense Secretary declaring that this has been a huge success. We have to wait and see for the battlefield damage assessment to take place. That will take a certain amount of time. Israel saying this morning that it is looking at how successful it was, and I think potentially worrying for the United States, and these satellite images that have now emerged of trucks gathered at the Fordo underground nuclear site on the 19th and 20th of this month, so just 2 days before. What were they doing? Were they extracting material from the Fordo site, and will that have an impact on that battlefield damage assessment? John?
All right, Ian, thank you very much. Just before we came on the air, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman briefed reporters at the Pentagon on the American strikes.
More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers. This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11.
That was Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott now joins us. And Rachel, that press conference underscored that this was a really complex and high-risk mission.
A complex, high-risk mission known as Operation Midnight Hammer, an 18-hour flight carried out under the cover of darkness, a highly classified, top-secret mission that only a handful of U.S. officials even knew about, that was shrouded not only in secrecy, but also full of deception, decoy, and fighters. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth saying that they spent months and weeks positioning the United States so that they could be prepared when the president gave the green light. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs saying that in a matter of weeks, they went from strategic planning to global execution, that the bombers were deployed over the Pacific as a decoy. Part of that deception effort, Hegseth saying the B-2s then went in the opposite direction, in and out and back without the world knowing. Now, forces now remaining on high alert, ready to respond to any attacks, which the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said would be a very poor decision. Hegseth says that the fact that those fighters went undetected for so long on Iranian skies should serve as a warning, and Iran should take that into their calculation as they figure out how they are going to respond, John.
And Rachel, on Capitol Hill, we see Republicans almost unanimously praising the president, Democrats raising alarm. In fact, Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer is suggesting that the president did not have the authority to do this.
He says the president did not have the authority. He is now urging Senate Majority Leader John Thune to put some legislation on the floor as early as this week to serve as a check to the president's military power. Democrats expressing concern here, particularly over the fact that we are learning from sources that they were only notified without really getting any full details. Now, I'm told that Republican leaders, Speaker Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, as well as Majority Leader John Thune, were in fact briefed. And as you said, John, Republicans now rallying behind the president after he decided to move forward with these strikes.
All right, Rachel Scott on the North Lawn, thank you very much. Let's dig into how the United States pulled this off. We have Colonel Steve Ganyard here, ABC contributor. So, Steve, what do you know? What have you learned this morning about the extent of this operation?
I think just how big and extraordinary it was. 125 aircraft, as you noted. So those 125 aircraft also came from a place that we didn't know. So on Friday, we thought that all these B-2s were taking off and they were heading to Guam, going out over the Pacific. So there were selective leaks that, yeah, look at what's going on over the Pacific. When in reality, these aircraft took off and flew east over the Atlantic, across the Mediterranean to conduct their attack. So complete operational surprise, complete operational security that allowed this attack to go without being noticed by the Iranians.
And this was an overwhelming attack. I mean, this was not a pinprick operation on a few nuclear sites.
It was. And the fact here that we had 3 separate sites. So we know that the B-2 had to be used because it's the only aircraft that can drop this massive ordnance penetrator. So we know that buried sites 200 to 300 feet underground at Fordo, 6 aircraft here. We also believe that 1 went down to Natanz because there is one area around Natanz that may have a buried site. Then there were 30 Tomahawk missiles launched against Natanz and Isfahan sites on the surface. So we'll have to see how effective they were, but we're already getting some images, some satellite images that show very precise pinpricks into the mountain in Fordo that would suggest that the mission was successful.
Yeah, it's 300 feet below ground if you count from the bottom of the mountain, but it's beneath a mountain. It's really a half a mile underground if you measure from the top of that mountain. The president claims that Fordo was they were all totally, completely obliterated. Is there any way to know that? Any doubt about that this morning?
We've seen some imagery from satellites that suggests that it was successful, but that's 14 MOPs going into a single site. 7 B-2s, an extraordinary amount of firepower, but we'll have to wait to see what the satellites tell us. We also know that the Israelis have drones. We probably have drones over the area as well. And because Mossad has been operating with impunity within Iran, perhaps the Israelis will get some eyes on in person close to the Fordo site.
All right, Iran's vowing revenge. What do we know about what capabilities they still have to attack the United States?
We know that the Israelis have degraded these long-range missiles that can attack Israel, but they still have thousands of these shorter-range missiles that could go after sites in Saudi Arabia, U.S. sites in Qatar, and so we're concerned about bringing in some of those Gulf states and attacking U.S. forces. We are also concerned about the Strait of Hormuz. So we know down here there's a 4-mile channel where 20% of the world's oil and a third of all the liquid natural gas transits on a daily basis. You take that off the markets and you're going to see markets react around the world, and it could push some countries into recession within days.
So the big question with that possibility, the president vowing retaliation if that happens, are we seeing the beginning of a long, protracted war in the Middle East? That's the big question this morning.
The Iranians have a choice to make, John. Do they come back at the U.S., which would probably mean that the U.S. is going to join the Israelis in a broader conflict or more attacks on Iran? Or do they go after some of these other countries, such as Saudi Arabia, which would pull those countries in, and maybe the UN? So the Israelis or the Iranians could either say, we're going to continue to get pounded by the Israelis and not retaliate against the U.S., or we're going to make it into a broader conflict that will turn it into an international incident.
All right, Colonel Steve Ganyard, thank you. Let's get more on the Homeland Security posture here with those Iranian threats. We're joined now by Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas. So, Pierre, a lot of Americans are wondering, what is the danger now that Iran somehow strikes the American homeland?
John, Iran does have capabilities that could impact Americans here at home. One of the most immediate concerns is the threat of cyber attacks by Iran or hackers tied to Iran's proxies. In the days right after Israel began its recent attacks on Iran, the Department of Homeland Security issued an urgent bulletin. And I'd like to read some of what it said. Iranian government-affiliated cyber actors will probably prioritize retaliatory attacks against Israeli targets in the short term, but may also target U.S. networks due to their perception of U.S. support for Israeli strikes. The networks mentioned involve U.S. infrastructure, the energy sector, the electrical grid, financial sector. The bulletin urged infrastructure officials to immediately assess their security to make sure their defenses were strong enough to block any malicious activity by Iran. And U.S. authorities also have been focused on whether Iran has operatives within the United States who commit acts of terror. In recent years, DOJ has prosecuted a number of operatives allegedly acting at the direction of Iranian officials, including some plotting acts of violence. And of course, now there's concerns that extremists infuriated by the U.S. attack on a Muslim country might launch lone wolf attacks on their own. And today, John, D.C. police on high alert, maintaining stepped-up security at Jewish installations and houses of worship, although they have identified no specific credible threats.
You certainly get a sense of that stepped-up state of alert here in Washington. Pierre, thank you very much. Earlier this morning, I spoke with Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us. The big question, is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, we're not at war with Iran, John. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program, and I think the president took decisive action to destroy that program last night. If I could step back a little bit, we have to give an incredible amount of gratitude to the troops who did an amazing thing last night. Think about this, John. They flew thousands of miles away, a 30-hour nonstop flight. They never touched down on the ground, and they dropped a 30,000-pound bomb on a target about the size of a washing machine. No military in the world has the training, the skills, and the equipment to do what these guys did last night. I know the president and I are both very proud of them. And I think what they did was accomplish a very core American national objective. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapons program. The president's been very clear about this. And thanks to the bravery and competence and skill of our great pilots and everybody who supported this mission, we took a major step forward for that national objective last night.
It certainly was a complex and overwhelming mission, 125 aircraft involved, we are told. Can you say definitively that Iran's nuclear program has now been destroyed?
Well, John, I don't want to get into the sensitive intelligence here, but we know that we set the Iranian nuclear program back substantially last night. Whether it's years or beyond that, we know it's going to be a very long time before Iran can even build a nuclear weapon if they want to. But I actually think that raises the most important question. The president talked about this last night. We want Iran to give up their nuclear weapons program peacefully, but there is no way that the United States is going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And so they really have to choose a pathway, John. Are they going to go down the path of continued war, of funding terrorism, of seeking a nuclear weapon, or are they going to work with us to give up nuclear weapons permanently? If they're willing to choose the smart path, they're certainly going to find a willing partner in the United States to dismantle that nuclear weapons program. But if they decide they're going to attack our troops, if they decide they're going to continue to try to build a nuclear weapon, then we are going to respond to that with overwhelming force. So really what happens next is up to the Iranians.
So let me drill down on what was accomplished, because there's a report this morning in the New York Times that Fordo, that deep underground enrichment facility, was severely damaged but not fully destroyed. But the president said last night the enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Can we say that definitively, or are we just not sure yet? I mean, have those facilities been obliterated?
Well, John, what was severely damaged versus obliterated, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. What we know is the program back substantially. And again, John, I don't want to get into very sensitive intelligence about what we know, but I feel extremely confident, and I can say to the American people with great confidence that they are much further away from a nuclear program today than they were 24 hours ago. That was the objective of the mission, to destroy that Fordo nuclear site and, of course, do some damage to the other sites as well. But we feel very confident that the Fordo nuclear site was substantially set back, and that was our goal.
The UN's atomic energy watchdog said that Iran had 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium. Do we know what has become of that? Was it destroyed in this attack? Do we know? That's a big
we're going to
stockpile.
work in the coming weeks. Yeah, John, we're going to work in the coming weeks to ensure that we do something with that fuel. And that's one of the things that we're going to have conversations with the Iranians about. But what we know, John, is they no longer have the capacity to turn that stockpile of highly enriched uranium to weapons-grade uranium. And that was really the goal here. Uranium is not that difficult to come by, John, but enriching uranium up to the point of a nuclear weapon, that is what the president put a stop to last night.
This morning, the Russian reaction caught my eye. Dmitry Medvedev, of course, the former president and prime minister of Russia, now the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, said the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. What do you make of that Russian response? And are they off base? I mean, they're saying that the nuclear program in Iran is still well underway.
Well, first of all, I think it's a bizarre response, but I also don't know that that guy speaks for President Putin or for the Russian government. One of the things that we've picked up, John, in our conversations with the Russians over the last few months, despite our many disagreements, of course, with the state of Russia, they've been very consistent that they don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And this is what I think many commentators underappreciate about what the president did last night.
Hold up. Hey, clown. Jay, clown. This is my platform. And if you don't like how it's operated, clown, leave. This is my platform. And we don't have to beg for nothing, but you're not finna come over here and not hit the like button, not support the platform. So I know what time you're on, clown, goofy. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and help you out. Yeah, I'm gonna help you out. Right here. Right, let me help you out. Yeah, bye. Just like that. Now, as we were.
Iran having a nuclear weapon, nuclear proliferation in the Middle East is a disaster for pretty much
You're gonna watch
everybody.
what you say
It's
over
one
here.
of the few issues where Russia,
Or
China,
you're gonna be
and the United
removed.
States have broad agreement.
You're not
We
entitled.
don't want to see a nuclear arms race in the
You're
Middle
not
East.
entitled.
So what
Let
the
me
president did was
repeat.
very important.
You are not
I'll let
entitled.
President Putin speak to what the official Russian position on this is, but I feel very confident that both for Russia, for China, and most importantly, of course, for us, we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and I think that goal is going to continue to animate American policy for the next few years.
President Trump last night also threatened additional military action if Iran retaliates or if peace does not come quickly. How quickly are we talking about? Are we talking about days? Are we talking about weeks?
Well, look, John, I'll let the president make those determinations, actually, but we're now going to have a serious conversation about how to get rid of Iran's nuclear weapons program permanently, meaning they have to choose not to have a nuclear weapons program and they have to give this thing up. Now, if you go back a little bit, John, what we have said consistently and repeatedly is they cannot have a nuclear weapon. We accomplished the goal of putting them back substantially last night, but there are two big things that the Iranians are going to have to choose from here. Number one, do they attack American troops in the region? If they do, as the president said, you're going to see overwhelming force from the Americans. If they
Obama went through the proper steps. Whatever deal he had, he went through Congress. He didn't bypass Congress. So stop bringing up Obama.
They're going to find us willing to work.
Obama did not bypass
support terrorism,
Congress.
Nuclear weapons programs. Then they're going to find overwhelming American force from the American military. That is really the choice before the Iranians, and that's a choice only they can make.
So what retaliation are you expecting? I mean, I know what you're hoping for, but they have vowed retaliation. What are you prepared for? What are you expecting from the Iranians?
Well, it's always hard to guess what the other side is going to do, but what we're prepared for is if they attack us in a maximal direction, first of all, we've got maximum defensive posture. I think that we're going to be able to defend as many of our people as possible. And of course, I'd encourage Americans to pray for our guys in the Middle East because, yes, they are under a significant amount of duress and a significant amount of threat right now. But then, of course, John, if the Iranians attack us, they're going to be met with overwhelming force. And I don't think the president could be clear about this. If you look at what we did yesterday, John, we did not attack the nation of Iran. We did not attack any civilian targets. We didn't even attack military targets outside of the 3 nuclear weapons facilities that we thought were important to accomplish our goal of preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. So how Iran responds, I think, is ultimately the ball is in their court. But if you look at what we did, it was very precise, very narrowly tailored to our objective. And if the Iranians decide to expand this, then that's ultimately their decision, and the president of the United States will respond in kind.
So you're raising the real possibility that this is not the end of this conflict, but the beginning of this conflict. You know, U.S. response to Iranian retaliation. There's one thing the president has been really consistent about throughout his entire life in politics, and that is the idea of no more wars. Let me play you what he said on election night and, of course, at his inauguration.
I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into.
So let me ask you, what do you say to those, including some of the president's strongest supporters, who are really worried this morning that the United States is now involved in yet another protracted war, conflict, whatever you want to call it, in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, John, I think the president has been very clear that we are not interested in protracted conflicts in the Middle East, but there's a question about how do you achieve peace, and we believe the way that you achieve peace is through strength. We took a very narrow and limited approach to destroying the Iranian nuclear program, John. That's what the president did, and I think that, more than anything, is going to ensure peaceful resolution in that region of the world. You can't be weak. You can't sit there and allow the Iranians to achieve a nuclear weapon, John, and expect that's going to lead to peace. It would lead to absolutely disastrous military conflict all over the Middle East. We don't want that. Our Gulf Arab nation allies don't want that. Israel doesn't want that. And it's one of the few issues, frankly, that unites the Arabians to the Israelis is none of them want the Iranians to get a nuclear weapon because they know that it would lead to the opposite of peace. And so I'd say to people who are worried about a protracted military conflict is, number one, the president, more than anybody, is worried about protracted military conflicts. That is not what we're getting ourselves involved in. What we're getting ourselves involved in is a very targeted effort to eliminate the Iranian nuclear program. That will continue to be the goal of American foreign policy, and it's that goal that is going to motivate our action in the weeks and months to come.
But this was, as we discussed, a complex and overwhelming military action last night, and the president is vowing something bigger if the Iranians respond by retaliating. He's also raised the specter of targeting the supreme leader himself. As you know, earlier in the week, he said he knew where the Ayatollah is hiding and that he would be an easy target. Has the U.S. ruled out targeting the supreme leader in Iran? Has the U.S. ruled out trying to achieve regime change?
Well, first of all, we don't want to achieve regime change. We want to achieve the end of the Iranian nuclear program, John. That's America's objective, and that's what the president has set us out to do. The president, in the very tweet you mentioned, or the truth that you mentioned, John, said explicitly that he's not trying to take out the Iranian supreme leader. He's trying to take out their nuclear program. And of course, we took a major step forward with that last night. And again, John, I think we have to back up and test some premises here. How do you achieve long-term peace? How do you prevent spiraling Middle Eastern conflict? Is it through overwhelming military power targeted to an American objective? Or is it by sort of walking yourself into these long-term protracted military conflicts? I think by choosing overwhelming force, and overwhelming force tied to something that is important to the American people, that is the end of the Iranian nuclear program, we can achieve peace much more fully than if we sort of sit on our hands and hope that somehow if the Iranians get a nuclear weapon, they're going to be more peaceful. That is a stupid approach, and the president rejected it.
All right, Vice President J.D. Vance, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Sean. Take care.
Coming up, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Tom Cotton, on the U.S. strikes and what might come next. We'll be right back with our special edition of This Week.
Does this space feel dated? Oh, wow. At NFM, you can transform any space.
I'm joined now by Senator Tom Cotton, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, an Army veteran. Cotton served overseas in both Iraq and Afghanistan before being elected to the House and then the Senate. Senator Cotton, thank you for being here this morning. You heard the president say this was a spectacular military success. He said obliterated is what has happened to the Iranian nuclear program. What is your sense? It sounded to me from Vice President Vance that it hasn't been thoroughly destroyed.
Well, I think we heard from General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that obviously we have a few days left of battle damage assessment, but there's no doubt that because of the president's decisive action, we have severely damaged Iran's critical nuclear infrastructure, which is what the president has said he would do for 10 years if we thought Iran was getting close to a nuclear weapon. Remember, this is a regime in Iran that has terrorized Americans for 46 years. For 25 years, American presidents have worried about them getting a nuclear weapon, have said they'd never be allowed to. Finally, President Trump has taken decisive action to ensure that they are not going to get nuclear weapons on his watch.
So what should we be prepared for in terms of a response from Iran? As you said, that they've sponsored terrorism for nearly half a century. I mean, what should we be prepared for?
I think we have to be prepared for Iran to retaliate. And I join the president in his warning to the supreme leader of Iran that if he targets Americans, the military force he will see will make last night look like child's play. We have troops in the region. Iran has targeted Americans around the world in Marine barracks in Beirut, in barracks in Saudi Arabia. They've targeted embassies of countries around the world. For all we know, they may have gotten sleeper cells into the country during Joe Biden's wide open border. So the threats are serious, and we take them seriously. President Trump has no higher priority, as do I, than the safety of the American people. And again, the supreme leader and the Ayatollahs in Iran need to understand that President Trump means business. They have a chance to sue for peace here, to dismantle whatever remnants of their nuclear program remain, and to continue to actually survive. Because we haven't targeted the supreme leader, we haven't targeted their energy infrastructure, we haven't targeted other critical infrastructure.
It's a new war for us,
Iran
Dana.
still has things that they hold dear that neither the United States or
What
Israel
Iran and Israel been doing, that was on them. For us,
retaliates,
yeah.
should the United
Stop
States target the Supreme Leader?
playing.
I
Stop
won't rule any
manipulating.
single target in or out, but
This was
President
not our
Trump
war.
was very clear in his warning last night. to
It's not a
Iran
new war to
that Last
them.
night will look like child's play.
Okay,
if they
Dana?
target Americans. Clearly, President Trump means business. The Ayatollahs understand that now. He was not
Stop
bluffing.
playing with
He does
yourself,
not
Dana.
bluff. And there are still numerous targets that Iran holds very dear. They should not target Americans.
Yeah, you're lying. When you're not telling the full truth, that's a lie. That's a manipulator.
Beginning of this, not the end of it.
That's really up to Iran.
This is not our war. They have been at war, not us.
Yeah, okay.
In 2020.
Yeah, you're deceitful. You tell part of the story. This is not new. It is new. When you said it's not a new war, it is for us. We're only concerned about us, the U.S. We're not concerned about that country's war.
Reagan sank half of their navy. That did not lead the war. It led to peace, not just with their targeting of Americans, but actually the 8-year Iran-Iraq war. So my message to the Supreme Leader is look at the lessons of history. Do not.
You said, no, let me explain. I'm waiting to see what you're going to say.
Question Petraeus asked at the beginning of the Iraq
Because
war.
what you put,
How does this end?
posted, what you typed is what I responded to.
Retaliation.
When you said it is not
How does it end?
a new war. It is for us.
President Trump made clear last night.
We're not talking about who had to be stopped. Hold on. See how you're manipulating? You're saying Iran had to be stopped. That's not what you said. You implied like this has been going on, a war between the U.S. and Iran.
So the ball is in Iran's court here.
So you're deceitful. Because see, you just moved the goalpost and said, okay, I'm going to let you go. Yeah, because you can't. Bye. Come back another day when you can be responsive fully. You lie. You're deceitful. You're a manipulator.
Does the regime have to go?
That's not President
Come back another day when you're honest and have integrity, because you have none. Bye, Dana. Everybody say bye to the deceitful Dana. Bye, demonic Dana. Bye. You're deceitful.
We are not pursuing regime change. We are not trying to put any troops on the ground into Iran. We are trying to eliminate their nuclear weapons program, and by destroying 3 critical nuclear facilities, we've taken huge steps in that direction.
But let me read you what you said back in 2017. So this is 8 years ago. You said the policy of the United States should be regime change in Iran. And then you said this: I don't see how anyone can say America can be safe as long as you have a power, as you have in power.
I kind of agree with you, William. He may not make it to.
As long as Iran.
Well, it's already 2024. Stop it. I thought you was talking about.
After these strikes, then no, America won't be safe from the Iran threat. That's the point that President Trump made last night. We're trying to ensure our safety.
But you don't believe the policy should be regime change now?
We're not going to invade Iran. We're not going to try to topple their government or try to replace it with a new government. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said, the Iranian leaders are so hated by their own people, they've so failed to deliver positive results for their own people, that might be the end of this, but that's not the American policy. And frankly, it's not the Israeli policy either. It is to it is to destroy their nuclear program and to eliminate the missile threat to the United States and our friends.
It's been a deeply unpopular regime in its own country for a long time. Senator Cotton, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Jim Heimes. We'll be right back. I'm joined now by Congressman Jim Heimes of Connecticut, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Heimes, thank you for joining us. Looking at what you have seen so far, have the objectives been met? We heard the president say the nuclear programs have been eliminated. Obliterated was his word. That's been a goal of U.S. presidents for some 20 years.
Yeah, John, I mean, obviously it's way too early to tell. You know, we don't even know at this point in time whether the nuclear material, the highly enriched uranium, was actually still at Fordo or at Natanz, right? This raid was signaled many days in advance. It's not inconceivable that the Iranians, not being dumb people, might have put this stuff on a truck and taken it elsewhere, in which case we just, you know, closed a bunch of, you know, tunnels in a mountain. So it's way too early to tell what the actual effect on the nuclear program is. And of course, it's way too early to tell how this plays out, right? I mean, we've seen this movie before. Every conflict in the Middle East has its Senator Tom Cottons, who promised us mushroom clouds. In the Iraq War, it was Condoleezza Rice promising us a mushroom cloud. And initially, and this is true of every one of these wars, in Libya, in Iraq, and Afghanistan, initially things look pretty good. Saddam Hussein is gone. Muammar Gaddafi is gone. The Afghan Taliban are gone. And then over time, we start to learn what the cost is. 4,400 Americans dead in Iraq, the Taliban back in power. So bottom line, the president has taken a massive gamble here. Some chance it works out. I'm, as a member of Congress, disturbed that this was undertaken without congressional approval. There's not much ambiguity in the Constitution about who gets to approve these things. But bottom line is, we don't know. And if you look at the three conflicts I just mentioned, I would keep the optimism under the hat for a little while yet.
But some of the president's critics have actually applauded the action last night. Let me read you what Adam Kinzinger, obviously no friend of the president, had to say. He said, the U.S. attack on the nuclear facilities, in my opinion, was the right call. We will see what the results are, but now the key now the key is suppressing surface-to-surface missile fire and negotiate an end to the fight with Iran. Good call by the president. Is it possible that this ends up being just that, a good call by President Trump?
Is it possible, again, setting aside the constitutional issues, which we should never set aside because the Constitution matters, is there some chance that, you know, we got all the nuclear material, the regime falls, and, you know, next spring we're picnicking at Samarkand? Yeah, there is some chance that that is true. But if you look at the history, and again, all we have is history to go on, if you look at the history of our military involvements in the region, they almost never end with the best case scenario. In fact, they usually end in something approximating the worst case scenario. And, you know, again, the president owns this thing, and we'll see down the road. You know, the Iranians may decide that it's foolish to attack our troops, to move terrorist cells around the country. Maybe they're just going to withdraw from the non-proliferation treaty, kick the inspectors out of Iran, take the uranium, which they have left, if they have any left, and build a bomb in secret. So, you know, sadly, the story will not be told probably for months or years. But again, if you're rolling the dice on the idea that we're going to see a best case scenario coming out of military action in the Middle East, at best, you are taking a very tough gamble in which the House almost always wins.
And what do you think is the worst case scenario?
Oh, well, the worst case scenario is that, you know, the Iranians have a lot more missiles than we think they do, and we end up with dead soldiers and sailors in the region, that they managed to move the nuclear material out of Fordo, and it's sitting in a warehouse right now, and as we speak, they are building a device. I mean, believe me, I will concede that there is some small chance for a best case scenario here. There always is. But again, history suggests that you better be you know, aware of the fact that the best case scenario almost never happens. So, I mean, you can paint a truly apocalyptic picture of any number of a dozen. Look, we haven't even talked about the other rulers in the region, right? You know, the King of Jordan, right, who is a critical American ally, you know, sits atop a great deal of popular unrest. You know, it's not inconceivable that his people may decide, hey, we've had it with you being allied with the Israelis in the United States, and now we have chaos in Jordan. So again, we could spend the next hour spinning the downside of this thing, and it may be a while before we know whether this gamble paid off or not. But again, you know, looking at history, you'd be sort of crazy to put all your chips on the best outcome anytime we enter into military conflict in the Middle East.
All right, Congressman Jim Heimes, top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back. To help us understand the fallout in the U.S. and in the Middle East from President Trump's action against Iran, I'm joined now by ABC News contributor and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and Iran expert Kareem Sajapur of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Kareem, let me start with you. You know more about Iran than just about anybody I've ever spoken to. What's going to happen now from the Iranian?
Well, Iran is in a very difficult position because they have an 86-year-old supreme leader who's living in a bunker right now. He has limited physical and cognitive bandwidth, and he's the longest-serving dictator in the world. And you don't get to be that title if you're a reckless gambler. So on one hand, he has these survival instincts, but he also has defiant instincts. He's been deeply humiliated. But Iran's options for retaliation are like the tactical equivalent of a suicide bombing. They can go after U.S. embassies. They can go after oil installations in the Persian Gulf. They can try to close the Strait of Hormuz, but the blowback for them would be tremendous.
But unconditional surrender, which was what the president was demanding and is still demanding, it seems implausible, maybe too nice a way to say it. I mean, is that really possible? And he just comes out and says, okay?
It is unprecedented for this supreme leader to agree to an unconditional surrender, but we've entered unprecedented waters already. The big question, as I said, is he thinking about the survival of the regime and what is best for the survival of the regime? Either he swallows poison, as Ayatollah Khomeini did 4 decades ago, or he continues to react defiantly.
And within Iran, what has this done to public opinion? This has been a deeply unpopular government for a long time.
I think this war and this bombing gives the regime what I would call a short-term sugar boost. They're trying to rally nationalist fervor. But my sense is that 3, 6, 9 months from now, people will go back to being angry. And it essentially polarizes existing public opinion. If you're a regime supporter, you have more reason to dislike America and Israel. If you're a regime opponent, you have more reason to dislike a regime which has always put their interests ahead of people's interests.
There's no obvious replacement. You talk about regime change. There's no opposition that you can conceive that would come right in, is there?
You know, at this moment, the people best placed to take over power in Iran are the Revolutionary Guards. They're a 190,000 strong army. They're not monolithic. You know, best case outcome, you could get an Iranian Sisi, like the leader of Egypt, who's pro-American. You could also get an Iranian Putin. So that's an open box.
So, Governor, are you surprised that the president ultimately did this?
I'm not, John, and I think that the president deserves an enormous amount of credit. This is against type for him. I'm sure it was a difficult decision, but what I think his analysis was he cannot live with a nuclear weaponed Iran. And Israel did all the heavy lifting. They wiped out any of their air defenses, really severely damaged them in what they've been doing over the last week and a half or two. And the president saw an opportunity that he might never have again. And I think we see the way we dealt with North Korea, that we missed opportunities to take them out before they became a nuclear power. I think Donald Trump looked at this and the president said, I'm not going to let the same thing happen in Iran in what is an even bigger powder keg in the world.
And what next? I mean, he was vowing a bigger operation, a bigger attack if Iran retaliates.
Well, that's up to Iran. And I think if Iran decides that they want to do, and I think your analogy is exactly right, it's a suicide bombing. If they decide they want to do that, I have no doubt that Donald Trump will bring more force to bear against this regime, which is probably teetering as we speak right now. So I don't think that's what the president wants to do. I think what he said last night was exactly what he believes, which is I did it to stop a nuclear powered Iran. And if they now come to the table, I'll make a deal. If they don't, and they try to attack us, we're going to go get them. And I think, John, the Democrats have been kind of tone deaf on this. And the reactions they've given so far, Congressman Heimes, who I have respect for, I just think they're tone deaf on this one. The fact is, I think most Americans are going to say, if in fact this slows or prevents Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, we're for what the president did.
And what about that divide within MAGA? I mean, we saw a lot of it going in it. We saw some prominent figures, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, others, that really didn't want this to go forward. Does that just disappear now? Everybody rallies around Trump?
You know how this works,
I
John.
think I do, yes.
You know how this works. But these folks Donald Trump is their oxygen. He is their water. He is how they live. And for Bannon and Carlson, how they get rich. And the fact of the matter is that if Trump calls them and says, shut up, they're going to shut up.
So, Karim, just in closing, you made a very interesting point recently, which is the Iranians and the Israelis are not natural adversaries.
This, in my view, has really been an elective war for the Islamic Republic of Iran. After the 1979 revolution, they decided they wanted their official slogans as death to America and death to Israel. And the irony is that they've been vowing for Israel's eradication for 4 decades. And this war that Israel has now launched against Iran may accelerate Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran's eradication.
And October 7th, Hamas's action may be the biggest miscalculation ever made in that region.
Ayatollah Khamenei was the only leader in the world to praise Hamas on that day.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris Christie, Kareem Sajapur. Appreciate it. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for continuing coverage of the strikes on Iran. And David Muir will have the latest on world news tonight. Thank you for sharing part of your Sunday with us. Have a good day.
Go after those other targets with precision,
Oh no, not him
speed,
again.
and skill. Most of them can be.
Understand that according to political reasons, we are forced to keep quiet. But I hope you know this yourself. They have agreed to take 18-year-old boys. They plan to recruit Baffin 500.
Now Putin talking about popping in.
Only 1,000, and then 500 people simply scattered. And the number of deserters is increasing. It is just growing very fast. Losses exceed the level of the mobilization. And that is it. What is next? Therefore, we agree, let's sit down and reach an agreement. We proposed the terms of the agreement in Istanbul in 2022. They were much softer than they are now. The situation has changed now. They are what they are now.
They are what they are now.
According to the same principles in Istanbul, we are ready to make further decisions. They will not reach an agreement. The situation may change even more in the worst direction for them. There is no need to delay. We need to sit down and reach an agreement. You see, I have not come up with anything. Believe me, this is absolutely objective information. Well, the unit
Here comes
has been
Putin.
supplemented by 47%. Well, hello. Will there be Tauruses or not? It is absolutely pointless. Well, think about it. We need to supply this Taurus in order to finally bury Russian-German relations. Details on Istanbul agreements. History of German-Russian relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for agreeing to answer the second question. Earlier you said that Europe and other countries made mistakes in relation to Russia. At the end of this year, you will have been in office as President or Prime Minister for more than 25 years. When you reflect back, have you made any mistakes?
Dan Chevrolet is your Tracks and Trailblazer headquarters in Kansas City. Our lot is stocked with an impressive selection of new 2025 Chevys. Whether you
throw a stone at me. Let us finish here. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President. The new federal chancellor, Friedrich Merz, recently said that he can imagine the possibility of holding telephone talks with you. Do you think it would be useful? Would you like to have contacts with the new federal chancellor? And do you think that Friedrich Merz could be a more successful mediator between Russia and Ukraine than Donald Trump? Thank you very much.
If the federal chancellor wants to make a phone call and talk, I have said this many times, we do not refuse any contacts, and we are always open to it. A year and a half ago, or rather 2, I had such conversations with Chancellor Scholz and other European leaders. They had a regular attitude, but at some point, when our European partners decided to strike a strategic blow to the battlefield, they stopped these contacts. They stopped them, but let them renew them. We are open, and I have said this many times. Can Germany make a greater contribution than the United States as a mediator in our talks with Ukraine? I doubt it. A mediator should be neutral. And when we see German tanks, Leopards on the battlefield, and now we are talking and looking at the fact that the Federal Republic is considering supplying Tauruses for an attack on Russian territory, using not only equipment, but also using Bundeswehr officers, this raises great questions. Everyone knows that if this happens, it will not affect the course of hostilities. This is out of the question, but our relations with everyone will be ruined. Therefore, we are considering the Federal Republic today, as well as many other European countries, not as a neutral state, but as a party that supports Ukraine. And in some cases, perhaps as a partner in these hostilities. Nevertheless, if we are talking about a desire to talk on this issue, to present some ideas on this matter,
Hold
I
on.
repeat once again, we are always open to this. I do not quite understand your question. I agree with what? What do you want me to agree with or not? They said this and that, and then you asked, do you agree with that?
Do you agree with either of their statements that it could lead to regime change
оценками, что это
and
может
that
привести к
Iran should
смене
prepare
режима
for
и что
unconditional
Иран
surrender?
должен готовиться к безусловной капитуляции?
As you know, Russia and I are in contact with the Prime Minister of Israel and President Trump on this issue. We always need to look at whether the goal is achieved or not at the beginning of something. We see that today in Iran, despite all the complexity of the internal political processes, we know about this, and I think there is no point in going deeper, but there is still a consolidation of society around the country's political leadership. This is almost always the case, and Iran is no exception. This is the first point. The second point, which is very important, and everyone is talking about this, I will only repeat what we know and hear from all sides. These underground plants exist. Nothing has happened to them. In this regard, I think it would be right for all of us to look for ways to end hostilities and find ways to reach an agreement with all participants in this conflict in order to ensure the interests of Iran, on the one hand, on its nuclear activities, including peaceful nuclear activities, of course. I mean both peaceful nuclear energy and peaceful nuclear energy in other spheres, as well as to ensure Israel's interests in terms of the unconditional security of the Jewish state. This is a delicate issue, and of course, we need to be very careful here. But in my opinion, such a solution can be found in general. As you know, at one time, we intercepted a project in Iran which was carried out by German companies and completed the Bucha nuclear power plant. The German companies left, and the Iranians asked us to continue. This was difficult because what the German specialists were doing was their design, and Rosatom had to make a lot of effort to adapt it all to the Russian design. Nevertheless, we did it, and this unit is working, and it is working successfully. We have signed a contract for the construction of 2 more units. The work is underway, and our specialists are on site. This is more than 200 people. And we have agreed with the Israeli leadership that their safety will be ensured. In general, it seems to me that given Iran's plans to continue the use and development of nuclear energy, including in agriculture, medicine, and so on, but this is not nuclear energy. And in nuclear energy, we could, together with Iran, why do I think so? Because the level of trust between our countries is quite high. And we have a very good relationship with Iran. We could continue this work and ensure their interests in this area. I will not go into details now, there are many of them, and we discussed all these details with the Israeli side and with the American side, and we also sent certain signals to our Iranian friends. In general, we can ensure Iran's interests in the field of nuclear energy. At the same time, we can take care of Israel's safety. In my opinion, there are such options. I repeat, we have offered them to our partners, the United States, Israel, and Iran. We are not imposing anything on anyone. We are just talking about how we see a possible way out of the situation. But the decision, of course, lies with the political leadership of all these countries, primarily Iran and Israel.
First of all, I would like to join my colleagues in expressing my gratitude for having the opportunity to be here, where you can directly listen to our colleagues from the agency and thank TASS for hosting us. As you know, in a few days the NATO summit will take place, and one of the topics they will discuss is that Europe is thinking about rearmament and plans to spend more on military spending. My question is very direct. If you have the opportunity to speak to the members of this agency, what would you say to them? What is your message? What is the task? Do you consider such a NATO rearmament a threat to Russia?
We do not consider any NATO rearmament a threat to the Russian Federation because we are self-sufficient in terms of ensuring our security, and we are constantly improving our armed forces and our defensive capabilities. Whatever NATO does, of course, it creates a certain threat, but we are coping with all these threats that will arise. There is no doubt about that. In this sense, any rearmament and an increase in NATO budget by up to 5% from the GDP do not make any sense. This is the first point. The second point. You know, for centuries, unfortunately, this is how I can fully affirm this, for centuries in the West, all the time, not all the time, but from time to time, there has always been a question of a threat from Russia. It was so convenient for the Western elites to build their own internal policy, because on the basis of a possible threat from the East, it was always possible to extort money from taxpayers and to explain one's own economic mistakes with a threat from the East. If you look at historical books, we will come to the conclusion that from time to time,
when you're in Illinois, the fun comes in at full speed. And no adventure is too tall, because here, even the little things in life are big. Plan your getaway to Illinois, the middle of everything.
For those of us with service animals, preparation is key. Ensure your buddy always has their ID on. Pack a kit with essentials, from food and water to vaccination records to a picture of you two together. Remember, service animals have a right to be with you in shelters. Practice evacuation routes so it becomes a familiar journey. Ensure your service animal is microchipped in case you become separated in an emergency. If you have to evacuate your home, take everything you and your animal may need. If you can do so safely, grab valuables and secure the home before leaving. Remaining calm will help you and your buddy focus on the task at hand. Together, with preparation, you both are ready for anything.
live by the rules. By what rules? What are you up to? Are you writing the rules for others and not going to comply with them yourself? But who is going to live like this? By what rules? This is where the crisis began. Not because Russia acted from a position of power. No, it was those people whom we called partners, until recently, who started acting from a position of power. And the former Deputy Secretary of State, Ms. Zvonopoulos, said frankly, we spent $5 billion. Why are we leaving now? We are not going to leave. We spent $5 billion on the coup. Wow, such revelations. Hello, we have arrived. Our Western partners have always acted from a position of power, at least after the collapse of the Soviet Union. It is clear why. I wrote about this because the world order after the World War II was based on the balance of power between the winners. And now, one of the winners is gone, and the Soviet Union has collapsed. And the Westerners began to rewrite all these rules for themselves. What rules? After Crimea, events began in the southeast of Ukraine. But what can they do? People did not recognize this coup in the southeast. Instead of negotiating with them, they began to use the army against them. But we watched it. We tried to reach an agreement. For 8 years, you see, not 5 days. For 8 years, we tried to reach an agreement between the Kiev authorities, the primary source of power, of which is the coup, and the southeast of Ukraine, that is, Donbass. But in the end, the current authorities said, we are not satisfied with anything in the Minsk agreements. That is, we will not implement them. But for 8 years, we tolerated it, you see. But it is a pity for people. For 8 years, we mocked them. In the end, they still mock the Russian Orthodox Church. They mock the Russian-speaking population. No one pretends not to notice anything. In the end, we decided to put an end to this conflict. Yes, using our armed forces. What does this mean?
Breaking news, hold
Are we
on.
going to attack Eastern Europe? Once a well-known Hitlerite propagandist said, the more incredible a lie is, the sooner they will believe it. This legend that Russia is going to attack Europe.
The nuclear non-proliferation regime that has underpinned international security for more than half a century is on the line. The dramatic events in Iran have become even more serious with last night's bombardments and the potential widening of the conflict. We have a window of opportunity to return to dialogue and diplomacy. If that window closes, violence and destruction.
Oh, Lord.
Effective, healthy blood pressure support takes more than innovation. It takes vision.
As we know
At Human,
crumble and fall. Iran, Israel, Iran, the Middle East need peace. And there is a path for diplomacy. We must return, as the Secretary General just said, to the negotiating table and allow the IAEA inspectors, the guardians of the NPT, to go back to Iran's nuclear sites and account for the stockpile. Uranium, including most importantly, 400 kilograms of enriched uranium at 60%. Any agreement, ladies and gentlemen, any arrangement will have as a prerequisite the establishment of the facts on the ground. This can be done only through IAEA inspections. IAEA inspectors are in Iraq. And they must.
Which volume is best? This one?
Require a cessation of hostilities so that Iran
Is the first? Give me a 1 if 1 is better. Hold on, let me give you 2.
the necessary conditions. Any special measures by Iran
Or 2. Which one volume is better? 1 or 2?
materials and equipment, safety and security conditions.
1.
Any special measures
Or 2? Oh. Or 2.
Madam President, based on the information, let me update
The one that's playing now?
what has occurred at Iran's nuclear sites since I last addressed this council 3 days ago. Craters are visible at the Fordo site, Iran's main location for enriching uranium at 60%, indicating the use by the United States of America of ground-penetrating munitions. This is consistent with statements from the United States. At this time, no one including the IAEA, is in a position to assess the underground damage at Fordo. At the Isfahan nuclear site, additional buildings were hit overnight, with the US confirming their use of cruise missiles. Affected buildings include some related to uranium conversion process. Also, at this site, entrances to tunnels used for the storage of enriched material appear to have been hit. At the Natanz enrichment site, the fuel enrichment plant has been hit again, with the US confirming that it used ground-penetrating munitions. Iran has informed the IAEA there has been no increase in off-site radiation levels at the 3 sites. The situation at all other sites in Iran remains as I described them to you. Continue to monitor the situation and advise the Iranian regulator to maintain its indispensable contact with the IAEA's Incident and Emergency Center. Madam President, the IAEA has consistently underlined, as stated in General Conference resolutions.
Okay, I'm finna go because this is just not working.
Facilities should never take place and could result in radioactive releases with grave consequences and beyond the boundaries of the state, which has been attacked. I therefore again call on maximum restraint. Military escalation threatens lives and delays a diplomatic solution for the long-term assurance that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. It also threatens the global non-proliferation regime. As I stated 3 days ago and before, I am ready to travel immediately and to engage with all relevant parties to help ensure the protection of nuclear facilities and the continued peaceful uses of nuclear technology in accordance with the agency's mandate. With your support, the IAEA can deploy nuclear safety and security experts to Iran immediately, in addition to our safeguards inspectors, wherever they are needed. Madam President, there is arguably no more important and universally supported endeavor than ensuring that we use the enormous power
Bye, Darren.
of the atom.
Bye. You don't like it, leave.
Let us not allow the window to close on diplomacy. Let us not allow
Stop
the
complaining.
non-proliferation regime to fail. Irrespective of individual positions and views, one thing is certain, and this is the simple truth. We will not be safer if there are more nuclear weapons in more states around the world. The IAEA is ready to do its part to bring this military confrontation to an end. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Grossi for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who may wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I'd like to express my appreciation to Guyana, Presidency of the Security Council, for promptly convening today's meeting at this increasingly precarious moment. I thank the Secretary General for his powerful statement. I also appreciate IAEA Director General Grossi and ASG ENCHA for their informative briefings. In just over a week, this Council has met 3 times. Yet, regrettably, each session has witnessed a further escalation of tensions. The Republic of Korea reiterates its profound concern over the deteriorating situation in the Middle East and expresses its sincere hope for urgent de-escalation. When we gathered last Friday, we voiced our hope that a renewed opening for diplomacy might emerge. It is lamentable that in a matter of only 2 days, that hope now seems even more distant than before. Despite the deeply concerning developments in recent days, the Republic of Korea remains firmly convinced that no sustainable resolution to this crisis can be achieved through military means alone. Indeed, now more than ever, we implore all parties to recognize that diplomacy is not merely an option, but an urgent necessity. We call on all sides to exercise maximum restraint and to commit in earnest to restoring dialogue and engaging in reinvigorated diplomatic efforts. Madam President, at this perilous moment, it is vital to prevent a further downward spiral. We therefore reiterate our call for full respect for the UN Charter and international law, and the safeguarding of the international non-proliferation regime. Any indiscriminate attacks against civilians or civilian objects are prohibited. This is an absolute principle that must be upheld, especially as the situation grows ever more volatile. The Republic of Korea highly appreciates the IAEA for its unwavering efforts to ensure nuclear safety and security under these extremely challenging circumstances. We also remain mindful of the safeguards implications of the current crisis. All parties need to return to the table so both military actions and nuclear safeguards concerns can come to an end. In conclusion, Madam President, it is imperative to avoid any further military escalation and prevent the spread of the conflict. We strongly hope that a renewed window for diplomacy will open again. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, thank you for convening this emergency meeting of the Security Council. The gravity of the situation in the Middle East demands the Council's immediate attention as it discharges its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security. I thank His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his introductory statement. And I also thank Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Janka and Director General Grossi of the IAEA for their timely and important briefings. Sierra Leone aligns with the Secretary General's call for immediate de-escalation to avert, and I quote, catastrophic consequences for civilians, the region, and the world, end of quote. While guided by our earlier interventions at meetings held on the 13th and 20th June on this situation, the alarming developments compel this Council to act with urgency. We are concerned to note that less than 24 hours ago, the United States of America struck nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Earlier that day, the State of Israel launched further strikes on the Isfahan complex. Iran also responded with missile launches at Israel. We take note of Director General Grossi's briefing on the off-site radiation in the nuclear facilities hit by the strikes. The event, however, heightened the risk of radiological disaster and increased civilian suffering. Sierra Leone is deeply concerned by these military strikes, particularly as they target nuclear installations and densely populated areas in Iran and Israel. Even as we recognize the complexities of the regional security environment, This development called for renewed commitment to the principles of the UN Charter and international law. The use of force is among the most serious matters before this Council. Article 2.4 of the Charter obliges all member states to refrain, and I quote, from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, end of quote. In this instance, we note with concern that the strikes were conducted without Council authorization, nor was there a clear invocation of the right of self-defense under Article 51 in response to or an imminent armed attack. As we approach the 80th anniversary of the Charter, born of a collective resolve to, and I quote, save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, end of quote, we are witnessing actions that undermine its promise. These attacks starkly contrast the spirit of collective security envisioned in San Francisco. We underscore that collective security remains the bedrock of the rules-based international order and calls for strict and consistent adherence to the UN Charter. Madam President, the targeting of nuclear facilities heighten our concerns. International humanitarian law requires particular caution regarding such sites due to the potential for grave humanitarian and environmental harm. The IAEA has repeatedly affirmed that attacks or threats against nuclear facilities devoted to peaceful purposes violates the Charter, the IAEA statute, and international law. We therefore stress the critical importance of upholding the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the cornerstone of a global non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. The NPT prevents nuclear weapons proliferation and provides a framework for addressing concerns related to peaceful nuclear energy. Actions outside this framework risk undermining the treaty's authority and effectiveness. We urge all parties to utilize the NPT mechanisms, including through the IAEA, to address legitimate concerns and avoid measures that weaken this vital instrument of international peace and security. Madam President, we have taken note of Iran's recent letter of 21st June 2025, Israel's communication citing self-defense, and a joint letter from France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. These underline the mounting claims and counterclaims, reinforcing this Council's duty to uphold the Charter. In this regard, Sierra Leone therefore advances the following point. First, we call for an immediate comprehensive ceasefire. Continued hostilities risk igniting a wider regional conflict, destabilizing maritime routes, and uncertain fragile energy markets. There is no military solution. We urge all parties to engage in diplomatic talks and resume structured dialogue towards restoring Resolution 2231 and a joint comprehensive plan of action before remaining measures expire on 18th June 2025. The potential broader consequences of an escalating conflict must not be overlooked. Disruption of key shipping lanes could severely affect small and developing economies, particularly those still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and grappling with debt distress. Such disruptions risk inflaming our human and common insecurities, economic distress, disaffection among youth, irregular migration, and fragile social cohesion far beyond the region. Second, we demand strict protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. We've already been briefed by ASG Yencha on the civilian casualties in Iran as well as in Israel since 13th June. Hospitals, power stations, and homes have suffered damage. We call for safe corridors for medical evacuation and humanitarian relief in line with international law. Third, we emphasize that the NPT remains central to global security. We urge Iran to continue full cooperation with the IAEA and resolve outstanding safeguard issues. We equally urge restraint by all states to protect the integrity of the NPT. Fourth and lastly, we support full IAEA verification, transparent use of the procurement channel, and provisional application of the additional protocol as confidence-building measures essential to regional stability. In closing, Madam President, We must recall that immense power brings immense responsibility. States, including those entrusted with great power by the UN Charter, have a duty to act in ways that uphold peace, security, and a rules-based order. Setting aside the Charter's principle risk weakening the safeguards that protects us all and may embolden unilateral actions elsewhere. At this difficult moment, Sierra Leone appeals for de-escalation, restraint, and the pursuit of diplomacy. Let us remember that behind geopolitical decisions are the lives of ordinary people, men, women, and children, who look to this council to safeguard their peace, security, and dignity. We hope that our actions will honor that trust and the promise of San Francisco. I thank you.
The representative of Sierra Leone for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and thank you for convening this meeting. I'd like to start by thanking the Secretary General, ASG Juncker, and DG Grossi for briefing us today. This is a pivotal moment for the region. A further spiral of conflict poses serious risks to regional and